to begin, and I think commissioners don't have questions now, so Lorian.
Good afternoon. This afternoon we just have one presentation for you. It's over the 2018 to 2022 Tentative Capital Improvement Plan. It's not actually in your budget binders, but you do have the handouts at your seats. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lindsay Poe-Rousseau.
All right, good afternoon, commissioners. We get to spend so much quality time together these last week or two. The presentation before you this afternoon is going to go through multiple parts. It looks a little different than what you may have seen during past presentations, and I'll try and outline that real quick. What we'll do today is go through an overview of what the CIP is, how it's crafted, how you all adopt it. We'll look at what the specific facility and drainage projects are that were requested and how we as staff have put that into a potential tentative CIP for your consideration. We'll then have our Public Works folks, David Spears, I'm sure with much assistance from Jim Weber, will come and talk through the road and bridge projects, and then I'll come back up to the podium to talk through the specifics of the funding plan. When I say it's a little different than past years, I mean that while your packet is pretty thick, it's not as thick as it used to be. We used to kind of do a deep dive into each individual project when it came to facilities. This instead will focus on the new way the CIP committee reviewed those projects. And so if you'll bear with me, we can certainly delve into the details. We have the experts from the CIP committee here in the room. And so please, if you have questions, stop me as we go through and we can call them to the podium. So, with that, just so that we're all clear on what the CIP is, the Capital Improvement Plan or Capital Improvement Program is a complete listing of all capital projects to be completed by the county within a 5-year period. And that can include projects that may begin within those 5 years, but maybe aren't completed in that time frame. We do have a capital improvement policy that defines what a capital improvement project is. That definition is a project that helps maintain, improve, or expand county assets other than heavy equipment, vehicles, operating equipment, office furniture and equipment, or software, and it meets one of the following 2 criteria. Either it's a new construction, expansion, renovation, or replacement project for an existing asset and has a total cost of at least $50,000 over the life of the project, or it's a major maintenance or rehabilitation project for an existing asset and has a total cost of at least $25,000 and an economic life of at least 5 years. And when we define what those CIP programs aren't, I think it's important that we don't program software or CAD or those types of things. We do that more through our operating budget, though of course we've talked about developing a process or a system that maybe could be used to do something similar for those. But just for this discussion today, we'll focus on facilities and drainage and roads and bridges because of how that CIP project is defined in policy. The purpose of the CIP is to identify capital needs for various county functions and departments and divisions. It's to prioritize all of those into one single comprehensive plan that allows for strategic planning, obviously. It fits the prioritized projects into the resources available in the county budget, either through cash or through debt financing. And it's also intended to communicate our long-term plan to citizens so that they understand what to expect over the next 5 years from the county. This year, the CIP committee scoring members are shown on this slide here. We'll talk about what that scoring really involves here in a couple slides, but you can see that it involves most of the executive team along with the OSS director, Scott from the MAPD, and then the CFO sits on that committee as the chair. It's also supported by some staff through which nothing else would happen. And so those folks are listed here. Tanya Cole as the Project Services Program Manager, though you also saw her listed as the interim on the prior slide. Lorian Showalter-Airy, who served in her capacity as the CIP Analyst for the committee. And then Jim Weber, of course, who's our Deputy Director of Public Works. So to talk through the process of how we have gotten to the point where we are and what to look for going forward, Tanya Cole, as the Project Services Program Manager, sends out a call for projects very late in the year or early in the calendar year and says, let us know what projects you're requesting. We ask that those divisions who are submitting multiple projects prioritize those when they submit them to the team. The CIP committee reviews those written requests and also has the opportunity to bring the folks who put in the submissions to the committee to talk through what those folks have requested to better understand the justification and maybe the cost estimates. Once all of that information has come in, the CIP committee is charged with prioritizing all the projects and trying to schedule them over a 5-year plan. They do that per a defined list of criteria that are included in the CIP policy that was last modified in 2014, and those criteria are listed on this slide here. There are 13. Some of them have higher weights. So, for example, if a project were to be scored a 10 on protection of public health and safety, that might actually be worth 15 points because that weighting is 1.5 for that particular score. It is such an important component of these 13 that we believe that it should have more weight. And so that is what was used by the CIP committee this year in scoring the projects that you'll see here in just a bit. Beyond that, the CIP committee did do something a little different this year, and this is how we will show you the projects when we get to the facility and drainage portion. The committee reviewed all projects. We did individually score them and then review them again in a group, and then we assigned each project to one of 4 classifications. Those 4 classifications are listed here. Category 1 is a high priority project, maybe with a higher level of need or urgency, or it's consistent with an existing long-term preventive maintenance schedule, where if we skipped a year, that might put us behind. Category 2 are projects where maybe the need isn't as urgent, but certainly we believe as staff it should be addressed soon. Category 3 were those projects that are certainly on the horizon, but with a lower sense of urgency. And we'll talk through that rationale when we get to those. And then category 4 are those projects that require additional information or study before being included in the plan. Not that they're without value or merit, but just additional information is needed to properly score them and assign them to a year and fund them. So that was, now that we've moved then into the funding phase, we essentially as a committee put together a tentative CIP. That's what we're calling it. We mesh that with the financial forecast and debt policy to see how those things look. If we were to bond certain projects or cash fund other projects, and the committee has the opportunity to review that and make changes based on how the CFO essentially tries to assign those numbers and those values and those projects to particular years. And then that revised CIP, after we've gotten that feedback, is returned back to the committee. And so that's really where we are at this stage of the process. The committee has had an opportunity to review. We have briefed the county manager, and now it's our opportunity to present this to you to get your feedback. So we'll present this to you today through a workshop. In July, we'll have a recommended budget that will be presented to you that will include an actual recommendation for the CIP for the next 5 years. And then just like the normal county annual budget adoption process, that CIP will be adopted in August. What you'll see today are projects totaling about $170 million. Of those, about $41.7 million will be requests for facilities and drainage over a 5-year time span. Roads and bridges will total about $128 million, which brings us to that number that's just more than $170 million. So with that, we'll jump right into the specifics. Unless, are there any questions about the process or anything we used to get to this point? Okay. So like I said, this is a little different presentation format than what you've seen in the past. This essentially shows you all of the projects that the committee felt were category 1. Those projects that were either high priority or consistent with an existing long-term preventive maintenance schedule. So I'll just review each of these and talk about what those totals are. And again, if you have questions about the technicalities, I'll be happy to call up Tanya Cole to come and help answer those questions. So the first project listed is the D25 flood control system major maintenance and repairs. Just as a reminder, this is the Wichita Valley Center flood control agreement that we have with the City of Wichita to fund about $500,000 per year. So this project totals $2.5 million over the course of the tentative CIP. Compliance with ADA looks a little different than maybe what you've seen in the past. The Commission has authorized the ADA transition plan. We know that we're to the point where we have some of the lower priority projects that are being contended with. You'll see on Category 2, when we get to that slide, that there are a number of projects that are proposed to county facilities. And so the strategy here is to spread out the costs of those remaining ADA projects to basically happen jointly with maybe some of that other facility work that's happening. Of course, this would require some additional discussion with citizens, community, and you all to understand if that's something that you're okay with. And that totals just a little over $1 million. There's also the outdoor warning device replacement and new installation project. Dan Pugh talked about this during his budget review last week. This is basically the tornado sirens to either do maintenance to existing sirens or to add new ones. That totals about $110,000 per year for a grand total of $550,000 over the course of the 5-year tentative CIP. Moving down then to the replacement of the exterior joint sealant at the Adult Detention Facility North Addition. This is a project that's been in the CIP over time. It has gotten to the point where we feel that it ought to be done soon to prevent leaks, and potential other issues maybe at the Adult Detention Facility. So that cost is $161,831, and you can see that that one is plugged in currently to the 2018 calendar year. Another project for the adult detention is the pod VCT flooring removal. Right now, it's damaged, and pieces of the floor can be used potentially as weapons. And so that's a safety issue that obviously we want to get corrected. And so that project of $687,259 has been plugged into the 2018 calendar year in this tentative CIP. The last two are parts of those long-term existing preventive maintenance schedules where we know which roofs and parking lots are due for maintenance. And so you'll see that at least for the roofs, there are projects at different years, and depending on the facility that's being targeted, the dollars are different. And then you'll see that there are parking lots on county property, and that's only plugged in right now for 2018. That doesn't mean that there aren't others on the schedule. They just don't fall in this 5-year time span. So all told, those projects reach about $6.29 million. And if I can real quick, I'd like to explain the footnotes that are on here. There's one single asterisk that says that it was funded to some extent in the 2017 through 2021 CIP. You'll see that nearly all of the projects on here have an asterisk like that. And what that simply means is that in the 2017 adopted budget, this project was funded at some year in the CIP that you all adopted then. The two asterisks, and there aren't any on this slide, but you'll see them on later slides, indicate that the proposal would be to use bond funding to cover the costs of that project. So, any questions on this slide?
Yeah, just to clarify on the ADA, you got that money allocated. Would that, but then you talked about incorporating with other projects. Would that
Right.
money go into those projects, or are these going to be separate from?
I think we could do it either way. Likely we would break it out so that we could continue to show you what those costs are and continue to talk about what those projects would be.
But this 216, this right here isn't going to be a separate project from some other project. It'll be incorporated into that. Is that
Right. The projects would be done concurrently and integrated with one another.
Oh, okay.
At least that would be the intent. Again, we need to have that discussion. But
I think that's it, Lindsay.
okay. With that, then we'll move to Category 2, and you'll see that this slide is a lot more money than the last slide. Category 2, again, is where the need is maybe not as urgent, but it should be funded within the short-term horizon. And so on this slide, you'll see that all of the projects at least are proposed to be funded in 2019 or later. Not that the work wouldn't necessarily happen before then, but this is the funding component. So the first project you'll see is the county administration building. It's plugged in at $16 million right now based on some very tentative estimates, and we know that we'll get more information over the next month or so that will be presented to you all. But this would be a project that we would propose potentially using bond funding for rather than cash. Going along with that, the next three projects would essentially, we would think, be done in conjunction with one another in addition to that administration building. Once all of the administrative functions are moved out of this county courthouse and this building can strictly be used for a courthouse function, then we would need to repurpose that space, obviously from admin space to space that could either be used by the district court or the district attorney. And so you can see that there's a phased-in remodel of that space over the last 3 years of the tentative CIP, totaling $7.5 million. Then we know that the sheriff occupies space here in this building on the 2nd, 3rd, and 8th floors. If the space study comes back and says that the district attorney and district court needs that space, then we would need to move the sheriff out of this building, leaving the 8th floor staff, who are judicial staff and would make sense to remain in a courthouse, but moving out those 2nd and 3rd floor staff. What that would require are these two projects that are shown here. The first one that says adult detention, first floor visitation remodel and courthouse space is about $1.8 million, and that would essentially repurpose that visitation space that is currently not being used over in the jail. The second project, worth $3.4 million, would expand the space over there, I believe, on the 1st and 2nd floors. In addition, coming out toward the street from the front of the jail. And so between those two additions, we believe that the sheriff's staff that are in this courthouse could be accommodated in that space. Next, we've had discussions, of course, about a county elections building right now that is programmed in at $3 million, based again on some very general information and an understanding that the elections office would need approximately 30,000 square feet to do both office and warehouse space. And then you can see the 200 West Murdoch remodel. This is better known as the old downtown tag office. This is something we've also talked about at staff meeting that may be accelerated, and if so, it would come out of this proposal and be a CIP amendment to the current year project. But that estimate for repurposing that for OMD use, the Office of the Medical Director use, is just over $500,000. There's also the juvenile residential facility HVAC system replacement. That's estimated at about $335,000. That would be in the 2019 calendar year. And then the final project listed under Category 2 would be the construction of a new EMS West post that would put it out a little further than the existing post, allow quicker response times for those growth areas out west. And you can see that that's estimated at about $1 million between land and the new building type that you heard about at a staff meeting a while back. And so all told, these projects would equate to about $33.6 million. You can see that the top four are listed as those that potentially would be options for bonding. And are there any questions on this slide? I thought there might be.
The new MS post estimated $1 million. What was the estimated price previously? Do you recall?
1.5 million? 1.4.
About
7. The two models we had.
Okay, so a fair amount of savings there.
Yes.
Now, tell me again, items 2 and 3, the detention and main courthouse space, that are about $5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are those contingent upon now?
So if all of I think there's a lot of things that's contingent on. Certainly the space planning study that's going on now. But what that would be based on is whether or not that space on the 2nd and 3rd floors is needed to accommodate the district court and district attorney as they go through their space needs analysis.
Kind of follow up on that. Now, on June 13th, we have at a staff meeting, we're going to do a space management meeting where we're going to talk about space in the courthouse, the analysis, what we found, etc. This is kind of worst case scenario. In talking to the sheriff, those don't necessarily need to be done at the same time as we're doing everything else. They could be part of a long-term plan that if the DA and the 18th District Court needed more room down the road, then we would do that project, or any number of different ways. But this is kind of worst case scenario until we have that June 13th discussion and we get our analysis back from the architect, et cetera. So, but you could see any number of different options available to us.
Does this is this just would be a replacement for moving people around, or would it provide a net increase in space for them?
If we did the court, if we did the sheriff's piece, his two projects, it would be an increase. If we just did reshuffling around, then we wouldn't need those two. You would the DA would also get a little bit of an increase by being allowed to move out into the areas, obviously. But anything over and above what he has right now, if he would get new services in over what he has allocated right now, would take more space.
But I mean, those two projects would provide a net increase in space.
Yeah, but I see that as forecasted for future growth, not what he currently needs right now. I think what by us vacating would give us him capability to be able to grow in the interim to meet his requirements, to relieve pressure on where he is right now to
If
grow.
we vacated this building.
Correct.
But if we didn't
that's-
vacate this building, why couldn't we just do those projects there and give them extra space?
But again, we're getting ahead of ourselves because we'll give you that analysis on June 13th. Because right now I'm not speeding from fact. I'm just speeding from, based off the meetings that we've had. But we got an architect working on it right now, giving us exact space requirements to fit what both the DA, but Judge Fleetwood, Mark Bennett, and other sheriff, et cetera, have said they needed. So more to come.
Okay.
All right. If there are no more questions specifically on this slide, I'll move to the next one.
Please.
So category 3 we said was defined as being on the horizon, but with a lower sense of urgency, and we can talk about why these projects are on that list. We have construction of a new EMS garage facility. You'll see that this has both sets of asterisks, and that it was in the prior CIP that was adopted by the Commission, along with this project would be one that we might propose to use bond funding for. We also have replacement of an EMS post 1. This is the post that's in Riverside. We know that the current space is fairly limited, and that as the ambulances that EMS uses get larger, it won't accommodate for that space, and so there will need to be an alternative. But again, this is category 3 because there is an existing post that can be used for now, but it's something that will need to be addressed in the long term. And again, this is one that has the $1 million price tag associated with it that would be less expensive than the projects that would have been proposed and adopted in last year's adopted CIP. You'll see adult field services facility upgrades. This project is worth about $100,000 in the final year of the CIP. This project would create some energy efficiencies at the facility, along with improving some of the aesthetics that are fairly dated and in bad shape. And so this would, it's not a huge price tag, but it's something that's perceived as a less urgent need than those other things we've talked about. And then finally, you'll see that there is a Parks Vault type toilet that is a Category 3 project that is funded, though, in 2018. That project will be at the Sedgwick County Park, where a playground was recently built, and the closest bathroom is quite a ways away. This would allow the parks to put in a facility that would allow folks to access facilities while they're there. And this would be funded with special parks and rec money that they already have access to and have some fund balance to access. And so that's why it was put into the 2018 budget. And if you have any particular questions about what a vault type toilet is, I'm going to refer to one of the other smart people in the room to field that question. Maybe Tim Kaufman would want to talk about that.
Very
Okay.
important.
So all told, Category 3 projects equate to about $1.8 million over the 5-year tentative CIP. So moving then to the Category 4 projects, those that are projects that require additional information or study before they're included in the plan, would be the Regional Forensic Science Center DNA Lab Edition. This is something that has been on the list before, has been funded in prior CIPs, but there has been some discussion that with the legislation not occurring this year that requires all of those sexual assault kits to be examined, that there might be some opportunities to look at the existing space and see if there are any opportunities there, and to more clearly assess and define what the need is that would be there. So again, it's not a project that is without merit. It is a project that requires further study and potential refinement of the dollars. So the next project that would be on the Category 4 watch list is the Sedgwick County Park Pond Bank Stabilization and Paving for about $400,000. This project is also one that you've heard of before. When we were discussing this in the CIP committee, Mr. Spears thought maybe he could do some looking into the paving portion of this, which might reduce the overall cost. And so pending further discussion and study of that one, this is also an item that at least in the tentative CIP is on the watch list. So any questions about either of those projects before we move on?
Well, that bank stabilization, that was in our CIP a few years ago. We took it out. Seems like it was $300,000 then. Is that right?
I don't remember that. Tanya, do you have any? I don't recall. Okay, we'll look into that.
Well, you don't have
And
to
follow
answer.
up.
I mean, it's just, it would seem like the bank has not got any better in the last 3 years. We probably,
I'm sure you're right.
okay.
Okay, any questions on this particular slide before moving on? Okay, so just a couple quick summary slides of the facility and drainage projects, then I'll turn it over to David. You'll see that in total, facility projects are worth $39.17 million. The drainage portion of the projects are worth $2.5 million for a total over the 5-year tentative CIP of $41.67 million. And you can see that the bulk of that cost comes in 2019 with that kind of conglomeration of projects to include the administrative building, the 2 sheriff build-outs, and then also the rehabilitation or repurposing of the courthouse space into district court and district attorney space. So by funding source, again, and we will talk about this more in depth during the CIP funding plan portion of this presentation at the end. But as defined in the tentative CIP, this would call for roughly $29.2 million of bonding for targeted projects, along with the use of about $12.45 million of cash. Again, for a total of $41.67 million. And we will have more discussion about this and the financial impact from debt service when we get to that CIP funding plan. So, any questions, though, at this point? Okay. With that, I will turn it over to David.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, David Spears, Assistant County Manager for Public Works. We handed out this for everybody. Hope everybody has one. If not, raise your hand. Jim can get you one. But just for information, it's kind of one of my favorite things. It's handy. Shows every project of roads and bridges. It's a summary. And so you don't have to flip through the whole. If you want detail, you can flip through the book and see the detail of each project. But this has mainly the year, the amount of money, and also arrows where it was and where it is now, and then some other side notes. So just keep this for reference for the future, and if you ever have any questions, call either me or Jim, and we can talk about it. But it's kind of a handy tool. Okay, infrastructure. We have 600 miles of roads. I think you all know that. That's 1,269 lane miles. It would be 1,200, but then we have several 4-lane roads. So going by lane miles, you actually have 1,269. 600 bridges in the county, according to the National Bridge Inventory System. And then we have 13,000 signs. You know, we have our own sign shop. We make our own signs. You have to have certain reflectivity. And then you also have to know where every single sign is located exactly. And we have all that information. All right. Project categories, we maintain. And that's the main thing we do is maintain, enhance, expand, and then quality of life. To maintain, we're really big on preventive maintenance. We pride ourselves on that, and I think that's what has led to Sedgwick County's success with the roads. It's a replacement with like infrastructure. Replacements may include some minor enhancements. And then most bridge replacements maintain the system. In other words, it's a bridge to replace a bridge that's already there. To enhance, we relieve bottlenecks, improve safety, and add capacity. To expand, we add significant capacity and we create new routes. In quality of life, we have bicycle, pedestrian facilities, and we have park and public space infrastructure. So the goals, we have preventive maintenance on roads, and we're going to move from a 5-year program to a 6-year program next year, which means actually 210 lane miles that we would need to do. And then we've always had the goal of to replace bridges. Oh, excuse me. Yep. Question?
I will when you're done with this slide.
Okay. We also have the goal to replace our bridges every 50 years. And so that would be with 600 bridges divided by 50, you get 12 a year. Now we do 6 in-house, the smaller ones, so that would mean we'd have to go out by contract for 6 other ones for the span bridges. Commissioner Ranzau, you?
Yeah, on the preventive maintenance from going 5 to 6 years, how much money will that save them per year?
Okay, let me think in my head here a minute. A five-year was 120 miles a year. A 6 years about 120 miles difference. So figure at 20 times 75,000. 20 times 75,000, about $1.5 million.
Well, spare 1.5 million. Okay. And on your goal of placing bridges every 50 years, now the engineer KAC recommends 75 years, and if we went with that recommendation, I've heard that multiple times, that changes the need from 12 replacements to 8 replacements.
It would, if you believe that. And I know he said that. Let me tell you a little bit of difference.
He put it in writing.
Well, no, okay. A lot of counties don't use salt, and we do. There's many counties that I'm not sure he's factoring in the factor of the salt that gets down in there and starts destroying the rebar in the deck. And that I talked to him later about that. You and I talked about that, and he did not really factor that in. There's a lot of counties that do not use salt like we do, and I think that's one of the things that does hamper our bridges. So that's.
Or could it be?
I think that's a big difference. That's a big difference.
Could it be just a difference of opinion between one engineer and another? How long's Norm been an engineer?
As long as I have.
Yeah, I suspect he knows about salt and
What?
everything. I think it might be a difference of opinion, but nevertheless, that's information good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all, David.
All right. Moving on. Okay. To maintain the road system in R134, and these figures are for 5 years. Right-of-way and utility relocation, $1 million. R175, preventive maintenance, $45 million. That's $7 million a year. Drainage projects, about $2.75 million. That's for miscellaneous drainage problems. We have things come up every year. A small culvert under 25 square feet, or, well, it can be 25 square feet, it can be under 20 foot long, and we'd have to fix that. and then traffic control 2.85. That's our a lot of that's our striping, and then buying our materials to make our signs. Okay, to maintain the bridge system, we deleted two things out. We've had in for a few years. We really don't think we need those anymore. The special bridge inspections and studies, because we have our own engineer that does that, Penny Evans. B464, we deleted the bridge design for federal off-system because we don't have that many off-system bridges, and we have applied for them before. I think we've just got a couple in the past because it's a strong competition across the state and there's not that much money, and we don't have as many of the off-system bridges as some of the other counties in the state. So we deleted that. Coming up, we have two major bridge repairs, $800,000 for Ridge Road and Bentley Road, both over the Arkansas River, and then 27 bridge replacements at about $28 million, total of 29 bridge projects. So to enhance the road system, one of the biggest things that we're doing, I-235 and US 54 interchange, that's $3.6 million next year, $4 million this year. The $36 million is the total. We do 10%, and that's the final payment next year. This is one of the things that has really put us in, I'm going to just say, a financial bind over the years. It's coming up. You can imagine what we could do with 3.6. Even though this is federal money, we could apply the federal money someplace else and take that, cash money and build bridges or whatever. But it has, financially, it has impacted us pretty significantly. R342 paved township roads, that's actually the miles that the commissioners would pick every other year. So you see we have 2018, 2020, and 2022 for that. We've left out 19 and 21, which are the years we would pick, and we're trying to save money, and also our pug mill is not in that great a shape, so we're not exactly sure how much longer that's going to go. If that goes down, we'll have to outsource the coal mix to a vendor. R343 widen Greenwich from Harry to Pawnee, and that is a project with Wichita because of the new Southeast High School, and we've worked with them on this, and it'll go to 4 lanes. Oh, and that would have federal money, and we're just splitting the match with Wichita. Expand the road system, Northwest Bypass. We're still chipping away at the right-of-way and donating, giving the state money. It used to be a 2-to-1. For every dollar we put up, they would put up 2. Now it's 1-to-1. So we're still doing that. And then the South Area Parkway, which is the ARC 95 design, that's 95th Street. And Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Howell know about that. They have been to the meetings. That's being looked at now to see for the future if that's a thing that should be done. We're showing in there $1 million in a later year for design if it should go. Quality of life.
David,
excuse me.
Question. Commissioner.
can we go back to the Northwest Bypass for just a
Yes, sir.
second? How much land do we have right now?
There are, let's see, I do not know in acres. I know there is $51 million to obtain, and we've obtained a third of it, $17 million. And this is a really interesting, we're the only ones in the state that have done this. Many people said it wouldn't work, but it worked. We put a protective overlay on the route. It's all designed, the route is selected, passed all environmental clearances. So if somebody comes in and wants to build a house inside that protective overlay, in that zone, when they go to code to get the permit, that triggers a red flag. They call us, we call KDOT. KDOT then gets a hold of the people and goes and purchases the land instead of them building the house and us having to buy the house later. So it's really working out good, but it's a slow process because there's just funding is not that readily available right now.
Well, the only reason I asked the question, I'm aware of the overlay, because we put it on when I was on the MAPC, but I've seen what an economic development that it's done on the bypass around 96. And I think that this would have a tremendous economic impact in Sedgwick County if we could get it going on the west side. And I'm not being parochial because it's in my district. I just think that it's got a tremendous economic impact. So I'm also on WAMPO. What do we need to do to keep this thing moving rather than...
I'm doing all I can.
You're doing all you can. But $1.983 million, that's over 5 years? That's what you're looking at?
Yes.
Well, no, that's a year.
It's not much.
Is that a year or total?
3 years. 3 year. We have a 3-year contract with KDOT for that.
5, but I think there's just 3 years.
3 left. We had a 5 years, 3 left. At the 1-to-1. We had a previous one at 2-to-1. They provided $2 for every dollar we did. This is just for right away.
How do we convince them to go back to the 2-to-1?
Excuse me?
How do we convince them to go back to the 2-to-1?
They say they're short of money. I mean, I don't know how you make them do that. This is the offer they made, and we asked about the 2-to-1. They said it's not available anymore, so
They're going to be happy to raise your taxes.
you take the 1-to-1.
Well, so I understand this. $975,000 the county has contributed. Is that per year for each of the 3 years?
That's the total.
That's a total for 3 years.
So 3.25 a year we've done.
3 years.
Okay. Previous to that, in the 2-to-1 contract, how much did we?
Oh, it was much more than that. I don't recall.
Same thing. We had the same contribution, but they were doing 2-to-1. We've always
So the amount per year was the same. Jim said the amount per year was the same, but it was 2-to-1.
Okay. So the 1.9 total, that's our total investment to date.
No, that's for the next 3 years.
Okay.
The 1.9 is what is going to be spent for right-of-way for the next 3 years.
Okay, do you have, off the top of your head, how much we've contributed total to this project?
I don't. I know 17 million has been spent, but they spent a lot before we even started participating. And then I have to give credit. Mays gives a little bit of money, and Goddard does too. Wichita does not.
So how much more do we need to get this thing to start moving?
34 million.
34, and that just gets us the land. That doesn't.
That's
build
just
the road.
right. The project's $500 million. Now we want to go just piece by piece, interchange to interchange. KDOT at first said no, but they are leaning towards accepting to do that now. They did a project up by Lawrence that way one time because they had an endangered species in the way and they had to stop. But it works, and it can work
Spotted skunk.
with some kind of a frog.
Okay. So, well, I have one other question on the I-235 and 54 interchange. I don't quite understand the numbers on your slide. It was a $116 million project, wasn't it? And our contribution was 11.6.
Okay, that slide is just for next year. There's 1 year left, okay?
Just next
3.6 next year. The year before we gave 4.0, and the year before 4.0. So 4 plus 4 plus 3.6 is 11.6.
Okay.
That was our total contribution, which was going to be a $116 million job, but I think it actually came in at like $108 million, but we still had to give the same contribution.
Well, the $36 million total, what is that?
That's the state's money and our money. You see, that's take
for the next
36
year.
times 3, and I think you come up with pretty close to 108.
40, and 36.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I just want to make sure that my memory reconciled with these numbers, so thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yeah. So, David, on that ARC 95 study, the R341, that $1 million, that's for future years. How much have you spent so far?
None of that 1 million. Oh, so far, just for the study. Do you know how much that was, Jim? It was with PEC
Okay.
and Trans Systems. The study, which you have attended some of those meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's for that part.
But nothing.
Nothing
Substantial
significant.
like the $1
The
million.
significant part is yet to come.
I thought it was 200,000.
I just don't recall.
Okay, thank you.
We can get that for you and email it.
Yeah,
if-
no,
if-
that's fine. I didn't know if any of that million was allocated. Or
That's for design of it, if indeed we do it.
Well, David talking about the Northwest Expressway, I think that acquiring land is, something to talk about, but that's later on.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay,
move on.
move on, yeah.
I think I've lost my train of thought.
Jump the track.
Okay, quality of life bike path, R343 for the future, a path on Rock Road from Derby to Mulvane, and the 1 million total. The 200,000 would be, that'd be an 80-20 split with the state. So it'd be 200,000 for the local. We haven't talked to Derby or Mulvane about splitting that 200,000 with us, but we will at some point. Just like on the aviation pathway, Derby's splitting the match with us on that one. We're currently doing that along Oliver. Our 345, a multi-use path on Rock Road from McConnell to Oak Knoll. We've had several requests to do that from people out in that area. You can actually see a worn path where people have been walking out in the right-of-way on that. So that's something to consider doing. We think it's pertinent. Watch list. Okay, 60 ICM. We think they are pretty sure they're going to do the ethanol plant, a state-of-the-art ethanol plant. They think that by August they'll have their funding put together. We are preparing ourselves in case we have to do a couple of roads out there because there's going to be a lot of heavy truck traffic, and so we have to reinforce 167th Street West, which is already a paved road, so they can come from K96 down to 61st Street. And we sort of will kill two birds with one stone with that because it's on our preventive maintenance list anyway. It's a county road. We, in this case, would do more than preventive maintenance, go to 2-inch overlay, but then that should last another 6 years after that. So we can take care of that, design that in-house. Now, the trickier part is 61st Street North, because there would be a half a mile that's just a dirt road right now that'll have to be paved. And probably what we're going to design for is concrete and do it as alternates, not only with the Super Seal, but with other companies build concrete, and we'll just see who's the lowest price on that, the old-fashioned way or the new way. But we can also design that in-house. Now, we've not started on that because we want to be sure this thing is going to happen before we get started and we don't want to waste a lot of time for nothing. So I think they're about like 90% sure that they're going to do it.
I did talk to ICM this morning to verify where they're at. They have 80% of the funding already signed up. They're looking at July or August to have 100% of the funding. They do have the water worked out with Westar. So long about August, we should have a good feeling on whether or not that this really is going to happen. But it sounds pretty firm right now. So if they do get the funding, they want to be in operation a year from that time. So we're probably going to have to look at this road really hard to make sure that that gets done in order to be able to support the opening of that.
Well, that'll be tough to do, but we have some good folks down at our place, and I think they can do it. And we'll get right on it as soon as we know for sure it's going. We will put our nose to the grindstone.
Okay, I'll stay in touch with ICM and keep you informed.
Okay.
Thank you.
This project's about, it approaches $1 million of county money in order to get this up and running.
Yes, sir. Oh,
But a part of that I know is our routine maintenance that you could take out of it. So.
good point. That was the other thing I was going to say. Okay, where do we find the $600,000? Okay, we've talked a lot about it. So far this year, every one of our projects has come in under budget. We would have enough money if you want to use that money that we have left over this year that we've saved to use that for this. And also in the CIP, the way we're setting it up from now on is to have a reserve fund to do things like this.
Okay, well, if we can make this happen out of our savings, well, everybody will be happier. Yeah.
Okay? Thanks for bringing that up. That's the other point I wanted to make. And I think that's all I had on that part. 47th in Clifton to support closure of Cooper Elementary. Commissioner Howell knows about this. This may or may not happen. Derby's supposed to have a bond issue and possibly close one of the schools in Oaklawn. Well, if they close that one school, a lot of kids are going to have to cross 47th Street to get to the only school that's going to be open. And I think we're probably going to have to put in a signal and a crosswalk there for them. So just wanted to it's a possible.
Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just along that line, is there any discussion about any type of safety improvements at K-15 and 47th, trying to get people? There's children walking across K-15 right now as well, and I'm not sure that's.
That will come with the aviation pathway, which comes up Oliver, and then it's going to go down 47th and over K-15, over the railroad tracks, and then back up Clifton to tie in up at MacArthur. Now,
that's already funded.
We have a meeting set up, I think, in the next couple of weeks with the railroad, because they're a big player in that because there's a railroad track there, I think. Don't we have that set up? To meet with them and KDOT and us to try to get this figured out. There will be a way to do that and get those children across there.
Okay. And then just so my colleagues know, yeah, there's a bond issue election coming up, and if that passes, then more than likely then Cooper will be closed. So that'll be the trigger for us to have to improve that intersection probably. Thank you.
So here's just a little pie chart showing dollars with roads, bridges, enhancements, all the things I just talked about. Shows you roads are the biggest thing, then bridges. This is the same thing, but shows you the percentage. So the 5-year summary, 78 million, 91% for roads and bridges, 6% to expand the roads and bridge system, 2% to enhance, 1% quality of life. Okay, here's just a bar chart for the CIP years. And what I want to show is the red is bonds, and I'm going to go into this more here, not just this slide. But that shows you the bonds needed to do the bridges to keep the program up. Note in 2022, no bonds. We've got it figured out. When we get to there, we think we'll be all right. Like I said before, what's really hurting us financially is that I-235 in Kellogg. That's really messed us up on finances. But I mean, it's a great project, don't get me wrong. It's a great project, but financially it has messed a lot of other things up. So right now the plan includes $12.6 million in bonds for the first 4 years. The 5th year is none, zero. Before we were having $4 million a year. Okay, so you can see this isn't even 4-year average. All right, no bonds in the year 5. Then, if you take away all the bonding, say you didn't do any bonding, we would have to eliminate 10 bridges from the 5-year program, and no bridge will be able to be replaced in 2018. We would have 0 bridges, mainly because of that I-235 in Kellogg. Okay, so this is a little picture from the past to show you what has happened, where we had the red shows the bonds, and we had it up through $4 million a year through 2015. Then in 16, 17, no bonds, and then in 18, if you don't do bonds, and I'll show you the difference in money that we will have between 15 and 18 is in red on this chart. In 15, we had 16.9 million, and in 18, if we don't do bonds, we'll have 13.3. You can see that's $3.6 million, which coincidentally is about what we spent on I-235 in Kellogg. But anyway, Commissioner Ranzau.
A couple questions. First
Sure.
of all, I'll point out that you said that without bond or debt financing, you'd have to take 10 bridges out of the 5-year program. That's 2 bridges per year. Now keep in mind, your program requires 12 bridges a year instead of 8, like the KAC engineer would say. But if you did 10, which is a compromise, that's 2 less each year. You'd be right there. Just something to think about. But beyond that, let's look at this here right now. So you're saying,
Trying to show each year the type of funds that were used. We had the bonding through 15 and then showing no bonds 16, 17, or if you didn't have any in 18, it's showing the difference. You see the general fund, what happened in 16, we got almost 2.3 million out of the general fund. And then this year, 566, but showing 0 out of the general fund
well, why would
in
we
18.
do 0 in general fund?
Well, I think it's looking at the big picture overall, trying to balance the budget. That money is evidently needed in other places.
Well, where are you going to get the money to bond then? You got, to pay off the bonds. If I'm not mistaken, in the past there we would bond $400,000 a year. Every year that'd require about a $350,000 to $370,000 payment. That's correct.
accurate.
So for those 3 years, if we were to collect that money and add that up, that's $350,000 each year. We're up to over $1 million a year. So somewhere that $1 million that we were spending on bond and interest, we should capture that and put that right there. So that's $1 million. You told me you just saved $1.5 million from going from 5 to 6 years, right? That's $2.5 million right there. And then each year that you don't bond again, you add in another $350,000 a year. In 4 years, you're scot-free. And then the 5 years after that, then you have extra money to put in a general fund. So I'm not sure why we'd go to 0 general fund. The whole idea, if we don't bond, was to capture those principal and interest payments that we would be paying every single year. For those bonds, 16, 17, 18, we're talking $350,000. The next year would be $700,000. Next year would be $1 million. We'd have $1 million out of the general fund or the sales tax that would be taken out right now, right? And right now we're not taking that out. So I say we need to think about that. You've never heard that before, have you?
I've
Maybe once or twice.
Well, besides that discussion, the red number, why are the red numbers here? What are they indicating?
They indicate what we got in 2015 and what we would get in 2018, which is 3.6 million less, which is odd when you would think you would get at least the same amount of money that you would have in 15 or close to it, especially with
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying, I just identified $2.5 million that you should be having, and the fact you probably don't need to do 12 bridges a year. 10 would probably be enough. I think you'd be pretty good there. Maybe we should analyze that possibility. How much money do we take a year out of that sales tax, that LST, local sales tax, to pay off bonds and interest?
1.6 million, I think.
1.6 million comes out of that 13.3. If that wasn't being taken out, we'd have an extra 1.6 million a year to actually put in the road and bridge project. Kind of interesting how that works, too. Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Is Lindsay going to analyze this at all, this chart?
I think the chart itself is an accurate depiction of what the public works folks have had over time, and so I don't know that there's much analysis to be had other than an idea of what level of cash support commissioners would want to put into roads and bridges. At this point, the forecast and what this is based on it was the transition of roads and bridges from 1 every 5 years to 1 every 6 years in 2017, then to 1 every 7 years in 2018. And so I think if we're changing gears on that, then there will be some initial analysis that's required to tell you. The only issue that we'll have to talk about is how that then cash for roads and bridges will come out of the operating funds and what potential impact that would have. As you've heard, we've had the cost of doing business and those incremental increases that happen year over year. And so I think it's going to be something that has to be done in concert with the entire budget, not just this CIP portion. So yes, we'll have a lot of discussion about that over the next month or so, but it's just those competing variables.
Okay, thanks.
Does that help? No?
Proceed.
To be continued.
To be continued.
The CIP has to be reviewed by the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission for consistency with the comprehensive plan. And the review dates are Advanced Plans Committee July 6th and the full MAPC July 20th. So I think it goes back to Lindsay now.
All right, Commissioners. So we will pick up in the presentation at CIP funding plan, but I think this is also a good time to talk about the other handout that looks like this, that should be at your desks. What this handout does for rows 1 through 25 is summarize the exact same information we already looked at for roads and bridges. Then you'll see the summary tabs for facilities and drainage. The project totals by type and project totals by funding source are also summary tables you saw during my portion of the earlier presentation. What I want to point your attention to is the bottom section, which says forecast impact. And so this is something that we'll be talking about as we go through these slides, but this will be a useful resource for you. Row 32 shows what cash funding had been intended to be used in each year from 2018 through 2021, with a $2 million unspecified amount in 2022, based on your adopted CIP from last year. So that was what was in the forecast that I presented to you last Monday. Then you'll see that row 33 shows the cash savings from this current plan, the tentative CIP, what would be used for cash in that project versus that 2017 adopted amount. So for example, in 2018, we had planned to do $5.765 million worth of cash funded projects. Based on the cash funded projects you'll see in row 30, these tentative CIP would result in net cash savings in the current forecast of $3.7 million in 2018's forecast. Looking at 2019, it's essentially the same thing, but what you'll see here is that we pick up debt service costs for bridges. Because in the CIP, the tentative CIP that David just presented, we have about $4.95 million worth of bond-funded projects that would occur in 2018, and so those debt service costs would then begin in 2019. And so you'll see that while the 2017 adopted CIP had $5.19 million worth of cash funding, we would save through the facility and drainage tentative CIP $4.0 million. Those savings would be offset by the new debt service for bridges, bringing total savings, positive impact to the 2019 financial forecast of $3.687 million. So what this slide, or what this handout does, is essentially walk through each year based on the tentative CIP that we presented, those projects that we said would be bond funded, and shows you what the net impact would be per year and then over the life of the CIP. And so what this essentially means is if you look in the total row, we are, based on the new debt service we take on, having a net impact to the forecast of about $2.26 million more in expense than we would have over that 5-year future. But that's because we have increased the total projects. We have an administrative building, an elections building, and all of those things built into the tentative CIP that we didn't have before. But the net impact to the forecast is only an additional $2.25 million over those 5 years, even doing all of those additional projects. So, go ahead.
Commissioner Ranzo has a question.
So, I guess I would say that line 33, I mean, for 18 and 19, that, I mean, I'll go back to the bridges thing. I mean, why aren't we putting some of that money that was previously forecasted? I mean, that's another option, is to say some of that money not returning it all to savings. Some of it could go to bridges.
It would be. The other thing I would say, though, is that we know we had forecasted deficits in the outer years, and so there would still need to be discussion about what cost reductions we potentially would need to have in concert with that discussion about what CIP to do.
That's true, but that's no matter what.
Right.
Because how much cash are we in road and bridges this year? I mean, not road, but CIP. Aren't we putting 10? We have 10 or 11.
I think it's closer to 11 million, but I'll check that number.
That's okay. It doesn't have to be exact. It's 10 or 11 million dollars we're spending in cash this year.
Yes.
With the projected general fund surplus.
Between EMS and general fund, yes.
So this year we could afford $10 million in projects. I'm not understanding why we can't afford some number less than that. Because this is the thing we got to be careful of. If we could do it this year and next year, now we're saying we're only going to spend $2 million. So that $9 million went somewhere. We got to set aside some money for I think for CIP projects, a little bit more than what we normally are, to avoid borrowing money on things we shouldn't do and dig ourselves in a hole. Now, there's some things like the admin building, some other stuff. I'm not talking about the big stuff. I'm talking about some of these road and bridges and a few of these other little things that you do. I think we got to be, and we're at a point now. This year, we're going to have a general funds surplus of $11 million. I'm not saying we need to spend $11 million on CIP. We could reduce that down. I just don't understand why we're not wanting to do that. But I understand we always have projected deficits, and we have to. And this right here says the road and bridges by 2022, we're going to be spending $900,000 in new debt. That's my point. That could be, if we collect that over those few years, by that time, that's almost $1 million that you can put directly into it. So, because what are we spending right now in principal and interest on roads and bridges? You probably don't know that because I didn't tee up for that. But
I think roughly $6 million a year, but I'll have to verify that.
$6 million a year. That's still to pay off bonds that we were getting $4 million a year. So I see that as a completely different issue than facility CIP with an admin building.
Okay, so that's just generally the handout. We'll go through a little more specifics that hopefully will be a little less complex and a little easier to understand. So the capital funding plans are guided, of course, by our debt policy. The preference through that policy is to do pay-as-you-go, so cash funding. However, there is a formal structure in place through that debt policy that says when it's appropriate to issue debt and under what circumstances. It does prohibit the use of debt to fund operations, so we wouldn't want to issue any debt, of course, to pay for ongoing expenses like utilities or pay. It also establishes multiple benchmarks, which of course we had the discussion earlier this year about how that debt capacity is measured and what limits we're able to use there. And then it provides some fairly specific guidelines for when debt is issued, how that debt will be structured over what term of years, and along with how quickly we will pay off debt. So you might recall that we try and pay off 60% of our principal within the first 10 years of a 20-year structure. And so that is, when you see the debt service costs that are reflected here, they are a little more heavier in the earlier years because we are trying to reach that goal of paying that off earlier in the process. So for 2018, taking everything you've seen together today, the facilities and drainage portion includes only cash funding in 2018, worth just a little more than $2 million. In 2018, the road and bridge program is worth about $58.3 million, of which $12.8 million comes from the local sales tax transfer. $4.95 million would come from debt funding for those bridges that David discussed. And then there are additional sources of funding, federal, state, and other local governments that contribute to that road and bridge program. And that would be about $40.5 million. So that particular part of the program would total about 58.3. When you take that, along with the $2 million for facilities and drainage, we come to a total of $60.34 million of capital improvement program or projects in the 2018 tentative CIP. For the 5-year CIP, taking all facility and drainage and road and bridge projects together, this is the same table from very early on in the presentation. We have about $170 million worth of costs, $41.67 million for our facility and drainage, $128.36 million for roads and bridges, of which just more than $65 million would come from the local sales tax money. Over the course of the 5-year CIP between facility and drainage and roads and bridges, we would have about $41.8 million of projects to be funded with debt. Other sources, which again primarily are the federal and state partners we have for roads and bridges, would be about $50.3 million, again for that total of $170 million. Again, the net impact on the forecast of the discussion we've had today based on the forecast I presented to you last Monday is shown on this handout that looks like this, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that handout or about the presentation itself, or we can get other folks up to the podium to answer questions you may have. If not, I guess we would be welcome to hearing your responses and thoughts that you might be willing to share today.
Okay, Commissioner Ransall?
I just wanted to say, I think that the new approach, the 4 categories in this sheet here, I think are very helpful. I think
Good.
it's a step in the right direction.
Thanks.
It makes it easier to see everything and understand. And so
Commissioner Hill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a lot of this is first time I've seen some of this stuff, so I'd like to take some time to chew it over and kind of get my brain wrapped around exactly what's been presented here. But assuming we adopt the budget at some point, what exactly are we approving? Just the 2018 CIP only? What's actually being approved if we adopt the budget with what's been presented today? What's actually being approved in that budget?
Well, certainly the 2018 CIP alone would be something that would be approved by you all as a part of the 2018 budget. And so those projects we would essentially see as move forward with, start the planning and preparation for those, either between the roads and bridge folks or the facility project service folks. With regard to the 2019 through 2022 portions, there's really nothing that you're guaranteeing or promising through that. It's intended to convey to the public the capital needs and the issues that the Commission is trying to achieve over the 5-year time span. But just like the 2017 CIP that you adopted last year, you'll see that the considerations we're talking about today have changed since then too. So we'll use it for planning purposes, but it's not set in stone until we adopt that single year budget.
Okay. Did I hear you say correctly that we're moving to a 7-year plan?
That had been in the 2017 adopted CIP. That had been the funding model that was used there. That will change based on this tentative CIP if the manager chooses to include that in the recommended budget and if you all choose to implement that.
But what's been presented today is a 6-year plan.
Right.
Okay. Just another, I guess, more of a comment, but more than 1/3 of our 5-year plan, more than 1/3 of that CIP is in the 2018 budget. So I guess I say when you get out past 2018, I don't really believe that that's a good plan in terms of 19 through 22. Is that the right years? Anyway, I believe that more than likely we're going to see some significant growth. We just haven't identified that yet. There's things in this CIP proposal that we didn't even know about last year. We talk about $170 million right now, but the reality is we all know it's going to be much higher than that. If every year we know we add things we didn't think about last year or the year before that, and so the list gets more crisp as we move forward. Which I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that $170 million is conservative. More than likely, it's going to be much higher than that. And so more than 1/3, about 35% of the planned spending in the next 5 years will be in the next one calendar budget year. So that is very concerning to me. I mean, we're talking about some fiscal strain in 18 to get started, and then things get better. I don't know that things are really going to get better.
I think it's all in 2019, though, don't you?
I think the bulk of the facility and drainage is in 2019, but I think this $40.5 million in other for roads and bridges brings that total up to $58 million for 2018. And when you look at the total CIP of $170 million, I think that's where that figure comes
Well, I guess
from.
my point is the 2018 CIP sheet on page 45, $60.345 million divided into over $170.041 million is 35%. Now, having said that, again, I see there's a lot of there's fiscal pressure added to the 2018 budget because of this spendy plan, and the reality is we think things are going to get better after that. I don't think that's reality. I think we're settling into a new normal. That's my only comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Renzo.
I think to clarify, but 40 million of that, isn't that
It's coming
like
from
the
external
Kellogg and
sources.
235?
Yeah,
So
state
it's
and
not
federal
really
funding.
It looks
Receiving.
inflated. Okay, back to the admin building. I know we're doing a space study. I'm just concerned, about the courtroom space. We hear rumors. I'm hesitant to make a decision on the admin building based on we don't really know what or if they're going to need. So I guess why I was asking about those two, the adult detention first floor and the courthouse space. I guess when we get these space needs in, and I guess one option I'd like to look at is just doing those two, even if that meant moving those up to next year and moving the people into that, seeing what that would have on facility space over time. But we can talk more about that as we move forward, because I know there's been rumors of more judges, this, that, and another for a long time, and I don't want to jump the gun on that. But if this right here would provide the sheriff and the DA with more space and then a little bit more space here, I don't know. I'd like to see some of those numbers as we move forward. I guess I'll wait until you get this space stuff done, but that's kind of, just so you know, kind of what a question that I have.
And keep in mind, those are, again, worst case scenario. The
Right.
16 million is probably 10 million for a building and 6 million for a parking garage, which, if we choose the right building, may not need a $6 million parking garage. But we wanted to put it all on there to give us options, and then we can always take away. But I think there would be a lot of taking away, even if we went for all of those. I think those are pretty lofty numbers.
Right.
Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you. One of the things that Mr. Spears pointed out, and I'm very familiar with it, is that this needs to go, once we finalize it, to the advanced plans and to the full MAPC, and they have to make a decision on whether or not that this plan is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And I guess my question is, have you all looked and see if it's consistent with the comprehensive plan? Has the CIP team done that?
That was one of the criteria that was used, and we have Scott Knable from Planning who is on the committee, and so we relied on his expertise, and he didn't indicate that there would be anything in there that was out of congruence with that comprehensive plan.
Okay. When we're putting the CIP together, do we look at the comprehensive plan at all?
If they do, it is generally by the individual divisions or departments that are making those requests.
Okay. Do the individual departments look at it?
If they do, I don't know about it. I would hope that they would.
Well, the main reason I ask is I was chairman of the Advanced Plans Committee that wrote that plan, and we wrote it, and hopefully it was going to be used. It was a lot of work, and actually we went for 15 years or so and didn't have a comprehensive plan that was worth a darn, and finally we have one. I hope that I would hope we'd start using it.
I'll just tell you that from the Public Works point of view, we do look at it. In fact, in the time frame that we're working on the CIP, we're also trying to update numbers, reporting numbers that are going back to Metropolitan Planning Department about, how are we doing? And I think what what we know about the comprehensive plan is it really puts quite a bit of emphasis on maintenance. And that's part of the reason why when Dave is showing you the PowerPoint, we're showing you the pie charts that show you that 91% is going into maintaining the infrastructure that we have. Some of the criteria that we're measuring for them are bridge condition, rating scores, for example. All those things are on target, and if we meet the goals that we're talking about of replacing these bridges in a 50-year time span, I mean, it's a real long planning horizon, but I think a lot of the comprehensive plan has to do with public works infrastructure. Let's face it, and we're working with it and we're looking at it, and the goals are all tied, and that's all worked into the strategic plan that the managers put together. A lot of those same goals have gone into that plan, and so we're very cognizant of what that's trying to do. I'm not concerned at all that the Planning Commission or the Advanced Plans Committee are going to find any problem with what we're doing.
Okay, but it's really a kind of a two-way street. The comprehensive plan is designed to be a living document now. Before it was really a dead document, before we rewrote it. But it's really supposed to be a living document. So as our priorities change in the county or the city, either one, we need to work with the planning department to make sure that that document is updated so that it really reflects what we're wanting to do in our CIP. So we need to provide feedback to them to make sure that that document stays a living document rather than sitting on a shelf collecting dust.
Right, and I would say this. I mean, they've had some change over there, and we're getting acquainted with the new team. And again, we're scheduled to go see them in July. It will be just to make you aware. We'll be over there on July the 6th talking to advanced plans. That'll be before the manager gets to roll out his recommended budget. So kind of like last year, and you were over there, last year's exercise, we might give information to them on July 6th. That might be needing to update on the 20th when we go back. But we'll do the best we can to keep up.
Okay. Well, I just don't want it to go back to the way it was for about 8 years. Didn't matter what you brought over to us. The document was so poor that we just kind of would throw up our hands and say, yes, it meets the requirements of the comprehensive plan, and sprinkle holy water on it, and we were done.
I thought you just liked our plan so well that we
I
didn't.
loved having you come over and visit with me.
This might be the right time for this question, but we don't have any plans to respond to the Regional Forensic Science Center request. Doesn't look like in here. Is that correct?
Tom, do you want to maybe address that, please?
Chairman, that was put back on a watch list because we haven't seen space utilization study on the current facility. There's some options to look at as far as having the state of Kansas, KBI, do some of our testing instead of us doing all of the testing. And we haven't been able to look at how they're using existing space. So all of those unknowns we need further study on before we can make a commit to move that up on the list.
So legislation.
And also the fourth issue, part of the criteria for that expanse was the new legislation, which would require us to do 100% testing on sexual assault kits, which has not happened here yet. So it's out there. We need to keep our fingers on the pulse of that, particularly if legislation would change. But we need to do a lot more study on that particular.
Well, the request has kind of been hanging around for a couple of years. I mean, it's not brand new, so we just have. All right, I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Well, it would be my hope, and I understand it's been around for a couple of years, and it's my hope that we can get a space study done on that to give you more science to make a better decision on, which I don't think has been provided to you yet.
All right. I don't see any more questions.
All right. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Lindsay. Lorianne?
Well, that was our only presentation for today. We do have time if there's anything else you would like to discuss, but otherwise I would recommend we adjourn for the day.
Commissioners, anything else on target or off target? Okay. We don't have anyone asking to speak, so we will adjourn for the day. Thank you.